Okay, I think we are live. I've had to do a check to see what number we're up to. I think this is the 36th edition of the Data Value Show. And today we're going to be talking about the power of automated pipelines. And I'm very happy to have as a guest today, Armon. Armon, how are you doing?
Hey, doing fantastic, Chris. Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure. So I'll start with how we first met. And I think it was a randomly meeting up in I played Colorado Springs, I believe. I think out in Denver.
Yep.
Randomly found out that we were in the same neighborhood at the same time, and we managed to that first face to face. It must have been about maybe a year. Is it 2 years ago now? I can't remember. It must be.
I think almost 2 years ago. That was a great coincidence. It's crazy. That was the first time we met in person because we had exchanged so many messages and talked on the phone several times. But I think you're right. That was the first time we ever got the chance to actually physically meet. That was a good time.
Yeah.
A few beers.
It was indeed. And shame we didn't get to go on the slopes as well. But I'm sure that time will come. But yeah, I love what you do, and for the audience, maybe give us that may not know you, give a bit of a background and what you do at Coalesce.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO at Coalesce. We would say that if you look at the analytics industry, the biggest bottleneck that's plagued analytics teams since the beginning of analytics in general has always been taking the raw data once it's landed in your database and getting it to the point that it's consumable. So we call that transformations. And Coalesce's entire mission, the entire reason for our existence, is to help accelerate any project that is on Snowflake within just a few seconds, and then eliminate as much tech debt as possible when it comes to actually building what we will call pipelines for the sake of this LinkedIn Live, but really just everything that goes on from getting that raw data to the point that it's consumable for all your upstream use cases, whether that's BI, data science, AI use cases. We're focused on accelerating that timeline as much as possible.
And I have to say, when I first saw the product, and we are partners of India, you have to read between the lines of my motivate. But it's being in this industry so long, and the movement from ETL to ELT, there's lots of benefits that came, and there was a lot of bad things that happened where we forgot to do things. And the main thing that we forgot to do was that transformation to a proper model. And I know where you've come from, your Warescape background as well is, it is all about the data model. And I think that we've not reinventing the wheel, let's call it, we're modernizing it to some degree. But taking the learnings that we'd had before and providing that nice tooling that gives you that ability to create those pipelines. And I think I love is it's just still code, isn't it? So at the end of the day, you're just automating the ability to get that. I'm going to use the word that business value, and you can argue about what that means to each individual, but in the case of our world, it's getting the data in front of the business in the way they want it quicker, and then being able to change those things afterwards. So
that's exactly right.
Yeah, so I'm talking about, I suppose, your approach you've taken, and that there's been others out there as well. So how do you see the future now? We've got this ability to do data ops with a product like yours, and then using some data modeling tools as well. What do you think is going to be the next evolution of that ecosystem when we're creating our pipelines? Or what do you see as the next big thing?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like everybody's talking about AI use cases right now, LLMs, Gen AI, like that's become something that is in every conversation. And the reality is that to actually get to any of those use cases, along with any upstream use case, the hurdles that organizations have to jump through are still very much in the transformations layer. It's in the data foundation layer. And so, of course, us being able to have an idea of what the actual data model is that you're building towards is going to be critical to that. I think you're starting to see organizations be more mindful of that just recently. But at the same time, being able to build out a data architecture for that data foundation in a way that's scalable, manageable, and has minimal tech debt is what is most relevant right now. From that piece, I mean, this, like, assuming you get that piece correctly, really the sky's the limit on what you can accomplish following that. And so instead of it being something that necessarily comes after this in some evolution, like comes after the transformation component or the data model component, in my opinion, it's just that these projects that we're all talking about, these AI use cases we're all talking about, will actually come to life, which is what's next. I think a lot of people are talking about doing them. Hardly anybody's actually able to accomplish them, largely because the prerequisite to do that is so difficult for a typical business that unless you're able to accomplish that, then nothing else really matters. And so ideally, as we continue to grow our company, as we continue to grow our customer base and deliver a product that actually resolves this historical issue, those use cases become unlocked. Those use cases become reality. And that's what I'm most excited for from an evolution standpoint. Us being able to actually do the things we say that we're able to do out there in the market.
Yeah, and I think that's been a problem with our industry, and hence we're always talking about, ROI and business value is we haven't always been able to evidence the achievements we've made, maybe because we haven't always made them. And I think that should be forefront. And I do like this data product movement of delivering a collection of objects that solve a problem and then delivering it in a product feature approach. So on that note, and I think someone mentioned this the other day, and it triggered a phrase I'd used in the past, and that was data gravity.
Okay.
And how I used the term before was, you need to bring more of your data into a central place for you to be able to report on it. The more you have your core stuff there, the more the peripheral stuff, it makes sense for it to be there. And this was in the days, you had a Starburst or other things like that, providing that ability to extend out, and where Snowflake's gone now, and Databricks of supporting Iceberg or Delta Excel files as well. So that platform gravity is being solved by those platforms. Is we can give you access to all of your data at that point. I think what I'm seeing now is that platform gravity. With both of them being able to run apps or running containers, you're actually not only bringing more of your data to that central place or central platform. You're bringing more of your workloads or applications there as well. So with knowing what your product does, is that what do you see the Coalesce as a vehicle to be able to deliver products in a more containerized way for businesses?
Yeah. So if you look at the companies that have been most successful in the analytics industry, typically speaking, there's some unifying themes around the product philosophy. So ease of use, simplicity, automation. You certainly think of Snowflake in this example. And the reason why so many customers love Snowflake is because they make things that are typically really difficult very easy for a larger scale of users. And of course, when they launched publicly, they were all around being the data warehouse for the cloud. And that was the scope of their offering. That's changed immensely over the course of the past several years as they take on different workloads, whether that may be Snowpark, whether that might be Cortex, where they're making a big push right now, whether it may be, OLTP use cases. And so the vision for Coalesce is to make anything that's possible on Snowflake as a platform even easier, even more automated, even more broadly accessible, broadly applicable to larger user bases, and also make it so much easier to manage those implementations as they scale. And so, one of the reasons Snowflake Ventures invested in the company was to help make Cortex functionality so much easier to accomplish and use for a larger customer base. So we did a webinar with them. I want to say it was a couple months ago, just showing, similar to how it might be going around building a traditional data warehouse and your dimensions and facts. There's tons of use cases where you would want to extend off of your end user layer and build out some type of Cortex functionality for forecasting. And in a typical environment without our product, that requires a user to write a bunch of code, versus with Coalesce, you can do so in a couple of clicks of a button, and it's all standardized. It has lineage, it's governed properly. And so you'll see that for anything that's possible in Snowflake's platform. Similar approach.
Yeah, I've just been taking some notes as I was going in there, and I think the word that's going is agility that carries up. And I've seen at the moment, Agile's getting some bashing at the moment, and I think as with everything that's been around a little while, it's time to review that manifesto. And I think there was a nice post I saw the other day of things that it forgot, and it was basically team skills, and whenever you're planning activities, and as soon as you bring in that risk of have the people got the right skills, dependencies on other people, or the time that they've got, that the ones that have got that skills, it's really hard to plan. So having that in a way that it is a single pane, of glass. It's all centrally controlled from one place, means that you can have that end-to-end pipeline delivered by a team that doesn't have to be so specialist in different areas.
The challenge with that is, if you look at the landscape, and you take us out of the picture, the challenge is that generally speaking, you've got products that have done or tried to do similar things, but they've indexed too far on one end. So what I mean by that is, you either have a product that is extensible, but as a result, not user-friendly and not easy to use, or you've got products that are easy to use, are user-friendly, and as a result, not extensible. And so for us, we want to give our customers the best of both worlds, have all the extensibility that's possible on Snowflake, provide the users with the ability to have the flexibility to do anything they would want, but do so in a way that allowed them to parameterize what's being done, standardize what they want to be created, and then allow less technical users to also work under the same hood, under the same product, without them requiring as much or as sophisticated of a skill set as the people who are taking advantage of the extensibility component of our product. Yeah.
And I think, again, everything gets bashing. I'll go for the modern data stack having that bashing at the moment. It's too complex, too many moving parts.
Yeah.
And linking back to that agile bashing that was there, is forgetting how to architecture stuff.
Right.
So and I think having something that you can have as your architecture one way that you can extend. And I'm not just talking about Coalesce here, but it's your data ops approach, it's your CI/CD approach, it's the ability to do database change management, it's ability to work at scale. And I think there's the good old one is you got to learn how to walk before you run. And I think it's working out what bit you automate and what bits you focus on at the moment, but understanding that you've got the right foundations to build on top of.
The term that I'm falling in love with, not because I like the term exactly, but more so because it's so relevant, is technical debt. And how do you build a large scale implementation without or minimizing technical debt? And that is one thing we found our product to do incredibly well, is minimize or eliminate tech debt entirely, compared to every other implementation I see with any other technology. Just creates massive amounts of technical debt. And when you think about scale in general, the biggest issues that come with scale is typically that. It's typically technical debt, and having tons of objects that somebody wrote or other people wrote with
Yep.
Their own dialect of how they wrote it, their own
Yep.
tribal knowledge that comes with it, becomes harder and harder to manage that as those projects grow. And so we're focused on standardizing and eliminating that component to make the project so much more scalable, so much easier to consume for the consumers and build for the builders.
Yeah. And again, you're spot on. I say, writing notes and just you got there, but as I was typing it, and I think it's that documentation piece of how
Totally.
something's been done. And tech debt is normally where people go and duplicate stuff because they don't understand something that's there, because it's much easier for someone to recode something than try and understand someone else's code that isn't documented or written in a way that's modular. Right. And I think I did a post the other day about the definition of done. After going to, I went to the data universe over at the Jarvis Center, and shout out to Veronica Durkin, who was presenting there. She was talking about definition of done, and afterwards I was thinking that what also needs to be part of that definition of done when you're handing things over is the architectural decisions that why you've made things and associated documentation. But again, it's normally either lost in some wiki page somewhere or not maintained, but having that in, you can have the documentation in there and decisions within the code base that's easily to understand why things have been done, and then document things of this is why this is reusable, and these are the inputs, outputs, extend it if you want. It does minimize that whole technical there. Not understanding something just doesn't promote reusability, and just that small amount of effort or that ease of being able to show what something does and how it's used at the moment, and knowing any impact assessment of you changing that, having that lineage, means you can move quicker. And I think the theory is that your agility gives you competitive advantage. If you're able to move quicker than your competitors, your business is going to hopefully do better than them anyway.
For sure. As long as you're doing it right. Yeah,
definitely. Exactly. I think I wrote here was templates, and again with my architecture sort of like it was always about patterns and templates, and there's some stuff we've been doing recently with a product called Backstage. It came out of Spotify. It's creating all these a template catalog. You can go there and repeatable tasks that your team are doing. You can run that, and that could be running something in Coalesce. It could be running something in your database modeling tool. But we don't need to keep reinventing the wheel. We just need to say, look, here's the shop with all our wheels in it. Which one do you want?
I mean, being able to curate commonly used templates is super helpful. And in data projects, there's so many patterns that are repeated throughout implementations, and it's all about what specific nuance there is to each organization. What patterns are they continuing to implement over and over again? And then how do we standardize on that pattern? How do we automate that pattern over and over again? Now, that's typically through the form of a template, and making those more accessible as well as editable or adjustable depending on the use case is incredibly helpful, not just from the development standpoint, but also, again, from that technical debt standpoint. If you've got something that's uniform throughout the organization where everybody's using a similar type of template, then at least you then know what to expect when you go into consume or change those pipelines. It just makes things so much more straightforward in a world that typically does not have much clarity.
So, and it's an interesting, because we can automate everything, and as some engineers they'll just probably go for some challenging stuff because it's fun. How do you see the right way of encouraging people to focus on the right areas? Have you seen that done?
I mean, I think again, the philosophy of our product is to minimize writing code. We're all about how do we eliminate as much of one of our Brit employees calls it the donkey work that goes on throughout building out pipelines. You know, you can automate those components. What you can't automate is the interaction between the business and the data team and the discussions around the questions that they're asking, why they're asking those questions of the data team, and then what that answer to that question leads to, additional questions. And so that part is a interpersonal human experience. You don't want to automate that. You want to encourage that behavior and do have as much collaboration around the data producers and the consumers as possible. And the best way to encourage that collaboration is to be able to deliver data at a rate that the consumer is satisfied with. And if you're spending too much time going back and authoring these transformations and changing these transformations and iterating and going through and having to deal with a bunch of technical debt or building the pipelines in the first place, or you're not able to demonstrate very quickly how you got to the result that you're sharing with the consumer, then that's where you see the relationship fracture. That's where problems occur. That's where people lose trust in the data teams. And so the advice I would give is, how do we encourage as much collaboration between the data producers and the consumers? That's what people should be focused on. Not like, you don't, as fun as it might be to solve a complex problem and build out really sexy new data objects within Snowflake and, you know, roll out and use Cortex functionality appropriately. None of that matters if you're not working closely with the consumers of the data projects. That's the most important component. And I think that's often overlooked.
I think, and it wasn't the area I was going to go down. That is really, really good. And something that I've been recognized as well as a challenge. And I think the buzz, or the phrase I call it at the moment, it's synthesize, refine, and build. Being able to synthesize something what's on once, play it back to them, refine it before we even go and build. And that's an area that really, I'll have a separate chat with you about that another time, actually. But I think the other thing is, I made a note of, is keeping the stakeholders happy. And I think that's, I think you can underestimate, not take that into consideration, because that is critical to the success. Because without them, you don't get your funding, you don't get the recognition, and you probably don't get your team won't get expanded.
You don't get the respect. You don't get the respect from the business,
or trust. And I think that's the another thing is with everything, everything's all based on trust. And unless you can build that trust up with stakeholders, they're going to go around a different way. They're going to do it. They're not going to commit to it. They're not going to put their effort into it because they don't have trust on the outcome. So, yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. So that's what we need to do in the day. Well, we need to build trust. But I might do. We have a whole new campaign or something. Maybe we'll get Scott the Data Whisperer to get some new hats on that one as well. I think the other thing that where I was going to go with this originally was I used the term friction, delivery friction. I've used this in the past in some of our assessments and where we looked at our clients. And the term friction I use is the time, complexity, and effort to performing an activity. And if you look at your whole SDLC process for all the different components that are actually required for you to go and deliver that end result to the customer, from memory, it's the infrastructure, it's the users, it's the containers, the database, the schemas, it's the roles on it, then it's the pipeline code, then it's maybe the data modeling piece, then it's the visualization or the machine learning. From memory, I think they were the sort of thing. But not all of those activities are needed regularly. For some of it, if you have to script it up manually or deploy it because it only happens infrequent, it doesn't matter. So I think the area that I always provide guidance is look at the activities that are happening most frequently that may have a large risk associated with them not happening, And also, that point you made is what would make the users or the end users see that response and build that trust in what you're doing. So, I think bringing those two things together of looking at the friction associated to that part of your SDLC process, and then also making sure that you're doing that you're getting that trust from your stakeholders. And if you put those two things together, I think it'll be a force multiplier effect, because you'll be able to deliver fast when the areas needed, but also keep the customers happier as well.
For sure. There's like two components to trust, I would say, that are either a pitfall for an organization, or it becomes something that allows the organization to flourish when it comes to data projects. One being just the sheer speed or the velocity that you're able to turn things around to the consumers. Another one being accuracy and being able to justify what was built and how it was built. As long as you can do those two things well, then you're generally going to have a really awesome relationship between the producers and consumers. Unfortunately, most companies don't have either. So
another thing you just touched on there is I think it's that every decision is right at the point it's made based on the assumptions and information we have at that time.
Exactly.
And I think unfortunately, because of emotional attachment sometimes between some of the decision makers there, when it comes to challenging that, when those assumptions have either been, those are no longer valid, or technology's changed, or the requirements have changed. I think it's sometimes the reluctance to pivot or reluctance to change historical decisions because of emotional attachment, but also because they're never documented or why they're made as well. So I think, again, having an architecture sort of maturity in organization that always review your tech debt as well as decisions made to see what is the right thing to work on that is going to make you more efficient and keep those stakeholders happy. So I suppose linking to that, it's delivering at scale. So we can always do this stuff, in a small teams. So when we start to go, okay, right, now we're taking this to a 100-man team, 200-man team, or an organization over thousands. What changes do you think need to be made in the approach when you start to have to start delivering in scale?
So again, it's an interesting one, right? Like if you're a small team or you have a small project, things can be certain mistakes can be made and you can get away with them and not feel the pain from those mistakes. Now, if that grows from your team of 4 to your team of 40, you start to see breaking points with the decisions that you make if you don't do certain things the right way. And so that only continues to be illuminated the larger the scale of the implementation goes. So if it's 40 people or 100 people or 200 people, that's when you see certain thresholds that get passed, which cause breaking issues, which cause the technical debt we're talking about, which cause the issues of being able to be dynamic or iterative when requirements change. It's what causes it to be incredibly difficult to extend off of whatever foundation's been built. And I think the building part of data pipelines or transformations can actually be pretty simple. If you're to just write code in the Snowflake console, you can get by doing that as an initial pass. But once that evolves is when the real problems occur. If you're not taking an approach that focuses on standardization, some of the templates we were talking about earlier, if it doesn't have proper lineage associated with it at a granular level, along with something that is easy enough to use or broadly applicable to a larger audience, that's when you're going to start to hit issues. And you'll only see that past a certain scale. And so if you're dealing with the a tiny use case or a skunkworks project, it's totally fine to make those mistakes. It's totally fine to not think around how to have a proper data architecture or best practices implemented. But certainly as projects grow, those problems become more and more relevant. And I think you at that point have to choose, you have to use technology in a way that leans into allowing those problems not to occur, or at least safeguarding you from those problems. And so a big part of our products, a big part of why we designed the product the way that we did was to encourage the right behavior, not just at the beginning, since the beginning is usually the easy part. It's more about encouraging the right behavior as the project scales. So that way you don't come into this issue where you realize, oh crap, we need to do a complete re-architecture. We need to do a complete redesign. We need to refactor half the things that were built. And at that point you're in too deep generally.
Yeah.
You get to a point where now you've dug such a deep hole that, and the business certainly doesn't care. They're going to continue to ask you questions. They're going to continue to have their requests. And now you're just treading water at best. You're barely staying afloat. Whereas we want to flip the script, allow users to continue to deliver at that same velocity and be able to deliver faster than the requests are coming in from the consumers.
Yeah, I mean, and some notes I made there, and I think that's spot on, is if you don't address that technical debt when the point it means you do need to scale, it becomes you've lost the battle. You've gone down a route that you can never go back, and normally you have to go, it's a brand new project, we start all over again. And
exactly.
We've had enough of them. Yes. I think the other thing I mentioned there or made note of is that data model. Actually having that target that you're heading towards, even if it's not gone down to that physical level, but having that logical one you're going to, and then have that, okay, we're going to go deeper on this area, we're going to go deeper on that area, and having that vision of where you're heading to is going to be critical to actually achieving the end goal and not having duplication or having spaghetti.
Agreed. Which, by the way, I mean, that shouldn't need to be a long, daunting exercise either. It can be a very quick one. I mean, it can be a very quick one on a whiteboard, even if you needed it to be. Just to have a discussion and an exercise around what are the consumers expecting? What is it going to look like from the data team? And you're not going to be 100% correct on that. There's going to be deviations, but at least from a high level, if you can nail down roughly 80% of what the expectations are prior to going in and spending the time and effort to build out those pipelines, then you're in great shape because you've got mutual alignment going into it. And it buys you a little bit of time from the data team's standpoint to go and build what the consumers are expecting in the first place. So if you can accelerate that timeline, the more you can accelerate that timeline, the more you can accelerate those conversations and that collaboration, the better.
You hit the nail on the head with the accelerating conversations. I've been in so many meetings in the past and people are talking and they're not actually having a picture that they're talking against. They may be talking about the same thing, but without having that line in the sand that, okay, do you mean this? Oh, you're using party, not supplier. Okay, all right. Let's give that as an alternative label to that particular attribute. Having those conversations, having something, a line in the sand to work is, again. Yes, I think that's the hottest takeaway today is remember everything we do, it's for the business. We need talking through the business. The days of technology led projects, I think, we need to put them behind us. Definitely. So I just shout out to some Tarek, shout out to Tarek, but I think that aligns to what we said earlier about, that event discovery, rules defined by the business. Again, I like the more questions you can ask and the better you can actually get those business rules from the business up front, the much easier and quicker your development process is going to be is going to be on the top of that. So highly support that. But I know, Tarek, with your background, that would be,
Yeah.
I know you know that.
I like Jason's comment here, automation for the win. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, shout out to JT. In fact, he's for once he's not in stealth mode. Normally comes up as an unknown user. Shout out to Dan Tooney as well. And what we got? Yeah, I don't think we can cover this one from Anil, which is how we get a Delta Lake up and running. So seeing that you actually don't run on Databricks, so it's probably not an area to talk to you about that one. And
No,
I'll
the answer to that question is go to Snowflake.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, that'll be easier.
So I think it's looking through some of the notes. I know you've only got the 45 minutes. We've got another 10 minutes left.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing we're talking about, the people part of an organization, and we alluded to it with how you start working in scale. And as soon as you start working in a larger organization, you have to deal with that whole org structure piece as well, and getting sign off when you're seen as a cost to the business. The easiest way of doing that, as go back to the point earlier, is that trust. So something that I promote is the data team should be seen as a sales team as well. You are sales, you are marketing for what we do as a capability. You could give the argument that the finance team doesn't need to do that. Everyone understands finance, though. Everyone understands about double entry bookkeeping, profit and loss, balance sheets. It's a known thing. The deeper you go into it, I'm sure it's very complicated. I know, that's why we've got a very good CFO. But we are that data department. I think we need to sell what we can do, the art of the possible, because it's that art of possible is changing over time as well. So what we said we could do last year is different than what we say we can do this year. So again, other industries or other departments in organization, they don't have that change of what they can actually achieve. And so I think that's something that we do need to focus on as data departments, professionals, is we need to sell what actually can be achieved, and keep that real. And
it's tough.
I think that's
tricky, man. It's really tough. Yeah. Like the skill sets of a data engineer versus an account executive at a vendor from a software vendor is so different. However, like you're saying, you almost need to have a sales hat on to some degree as a data professional, because you're required, or at least your life becomes so much easier if you're able to actually quantify what the value is associated with the project that you're building. Now, typically speaking, you would hope the consumers of data have an idea of the value associated with it. But if you're able to very clearly state, hey, we built out this data project, which allowed us to have visibility into these things. And because we had visibility into those things, we saved our company X amount of money, or we helped our company build a new product that made us X amount of money. Like whatever that full holistic narrative is, I think is very important for data teams to have a grasp with. And unfortunately, it's just too far removed from the destination. So
it's something that's been a pet project of mine, and myself and Matt, we've been doing lots of talks and content that may one day get into a book at one point. But and one of those things, the definition of business value, and this phrase we use is an evidenceable positive effect on your business's performance. And that word evidenceable is so critical, because we're selling ourselves as data professionals to the business to say, look, you can do this, we can do this for you, but if they say to us, can you evidence it? Well, that's a bit harder. I think it's anything, again, with that data product mentality that we should be thinking. And, we should be thinking, okay, well, as part of that, how are we going to measure the success for this? And I think there's a good comment here from Robin Davis, actually. I hate when we talk about cost like bean counters. Cost doesn't equal value. They don't see the value. It comes with experience, benefits, and outcomes. And I think, that's right. Again, we should be talking about our experience. We should talk about how we provided benefits before. We should be able to evidence how we did that and have those outcomes defined. If we can do that, then we don't have to sell what we do. The customers we've delivered to can go and tell, the other departments, how we've done. Well, that data project did do what they said it would. So, I think that's something we need to get better at, and I'm hoping that data product mentality, having FinOps nailed, so we can actually prove, recharge to people what they're using, working with the business better to actually define what features they can actually charge, or how much they can charge a customer, or what is the value of doing that to the customer from a retention perspective, from a upsell opportunities.
Exactly.
Us all working much closer together. I think it's not IT versus the business. We are one business.
Man, I couldn't agree more. I mean, from a cost standpoint, like if somebody's saying, if they're using the term cost, like bean counters, that's probably not the best situation. Like people in business should understand you have to spend money to make money. That's a given. I think that in order to get to some type of profit or some types of result or some type of value, you're going to have to spend. You're going to have to increase cost to some degree. It's all about what does that actually turn into. Now, I think the gap that most people fall in is that they're not able to determine what value is going to come from the cost. So they're sheepish or they're squeamish. They're hesitant to increase costs without clarity. And so if you're able to deliver value from the data, or at least able to deliver what's expected of the data team quickly and efficiently, as well as you're able to be dynamic when changes or where requirements change, then cost becomes less of a concern because you're able to get answers at the rate that you need them, and you're able to make decisions that lead to some of the things you were talking about earlier, like retention, like new products, like different SKUs and different adjustments you can make to the business. So.
Yeah, and I think I always like to, if you ask these questions in your organisation, depending on the size of it, how easy it is to get that. But if you understand what the business objectives are for that organisation, and if it's written all over there, it's to cut costs and cut things like this, you're probably not going to get a data project across the line because the CFO is going to be signing it off, and the CFO is going to want to see intra-year benefits from that. So I think it's understanding, if the opposite end of the spectrum, if you're at Uber, 11-year, 12-year runway till you start making money, it's not about making a difference on the balance sheet.
That's by design, right? That's by design, and that's under the assumption that growth is so explosive that you can justify being unprofitable for such a long period of time. And if you don't, somebody else will. So there's full justification as to why you do that. That's hardly the case with data projects. They should not be
exactly
the same way.
No, not at all. Not at all, because the technology would have changed by the time you actually get to that.
You want to be able to deliver value quickly.
But I think is that medium ground, and I think that's something that's being lost. I've talked about this many times about OPEX versus CAPEX mentality. And back when I started doing this, things were 3 or 4 year plans. You actually had to do that. You had to estimate your storage, your growth, the consumption, the licensing costs, the development team, everything. You had to think of it up front before you even got given the money.
Even projects were approached that way too, right? Like the actual implementations were more of a big bang. Here's a 6 or 12 month life cycle. You're not going to see anything until the end of that 6 or 12 months. And then we can start talking about iterations. That's kind of how it was.
And then after that, Agile came along. Then after that, all the cloud spend for OPEX came along. For those two things negated, that forward thinking. Whether that was always the right approach, and I think there's a balance of what's needed. But we do need to start thinking of, not just this year as a data. It's a 3 year roadmap, and it's always iterating. You always should be having a 3 year roadmap, which you refine.
The biggest thing is build the foundation for scale. Like if there's one core issue I see data teams falling through is that they build as if it's going to be a small project forever because they're just working on a small project in that moment. And then it ends up biting them in the ass big time as that project grows. And you should assume if you're doing something, it's going to be successful. So you may as well build it with the foundation for scale in mind.
Yeah, definitely. I use this analogy. Like if you want that force multiplier effect of selling the £50 million penthouse apartment on the 50th floor, you've got to have 49 floors below it that are going to be able to support that one to actually go and get it. So, yeah, have that North Star, what you're heading towards, and then work out how you can incrementally get to that. But yeah, I think having that vision, I think, is something that well, it's definitely something we need to bring back, and having that vision shared with the business. You know, it's a shared, not just your data vision, not just your data strategy. It's the business strategy that's supported by the data initiative and the business initiatives working together. But yeah, there we go on our soapboxes here anyway. So I know that you had 45 minutes, and we're pretty much there. I'm just going to see if there's any more shout outs here. I think everyone that tuned in, thank you very much. But no more questions there. So if anyone wants to catch up with you, Armon, or see what's going on, how will they find your catch up you?
I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. You can send me a connection request on LinkedIn, hit me with a follow, go to our website, request a demo, kick off a free trial if you want to play with the product. Otherwise, feel free to reach out directly. This was awesome. This was awesome, Chris. It was great I usually am the one interviewing, so it's so nice for a change to be the one that's being interviewed. I know you've been on our Coffee with Coalesce event, so this was easy and fun. And thanks to the audience for getting in.
Yeah, no, it's always good chatting here, and it's always fun. So I suppose one thing to shout out is well done for your recent your funding you got. So it was great to see, and just shows. I think that the market's view of the importance of transformation and what you guys are doing at Coalesce. So well, I know the team love working with you guys. They had good fun on the recent project at some bank. So. It was good fun. But I'll see you at the Snowflake Summit, but I'm sure we'll speak before. I'm not too sure. I think next week on the show I've got I haven't got the banner up at the moment, but I think we're talking about Neutronics and the VMware acquisition. What's that show? I mean, an interesting topic there. I've got two guys from Towers Associates coming on. So anyone check out that next week. And I'm in New York until 17th, apart from in Cincinnati a few days. So if anyone wants to catch up, I'm in New York for a bit and then back in London for a week. But Armon, thanks again for coming on. Always a pleasure. Always enjoyed chatting. Until next time.
Amazing. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Cheers.